The sun shone brightly in the blue sky, filtering through the leaves of the trees in the park. The smell of freshly cut grass and the distant sound of children playing created a perfect atmosphere for our picnic. Daniel and I were lying on the checkered blanket, surrounded by a selection of fruits, sandwiches, and a bottle of wine that I had chosen with such care. The joy of that moment seemed to float in the air, as if the world around us had stopped to watch us. "Do you remember our first date?" Daniel asked me, his deep and captivating gaze making me forget everything else. He was lying on his side, resting his head on his hand, and I could see a playful glint in his eyes. "Of course I remember. You almost spilled juice on my clothes." I laughed, recalling the scene. He had been so clumsy, but that moment won me over immediately. "And you looked so serious, like you were about to give me a lecture," he shot back, making a comical face that made me laugh even more. "I was just trying to keep it classy," I said, winking at him. "But you know I fell in love with you at that moment, even with your clumsy first impression." Daniel smiled, and the way he looked at me made me feel like we were the only two people in the world. "I promise I'll never let you feel that way again. You're the reason I wake up every day with a smile on my face." A warmth rose to my cheeks. "You know I feel that way too, right? I dream about our future together. Marriage, a house, kids." The words flowed out without me thinking, and the idea of a future with him felt so tangible, so sweet. "Me too," he exclaimed, sitting up a little, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "We could have a house with a huge garden, and our kids could run and play. And don't forget the dog." He paused and, with a mischievous smile, continued, "A Labrador, of course." "A Labrador?" I laughed. "You just want a dog because you've always wanted a furry friend to play with." "You got me," he said, laughing. "But just imagine you and me together, raising a family. That's all I want." Looking at him, my heart raced. Everything felt so perfect in that moment. I knew that Daniel was the man I wanted to spend my life with. The sun was shining on his face, making his dark hair look even more radiant. He had a way of making me feel safe, as if nothing could go wrong. After a while, as we were there, talking and laughing, I took my phone to snap a picture of us. "Let's capture this moment," I said, lifting the phone. Daniel struck an exaggerated pose, putting his hand on his head like a prince. I laughed and clicked, capturing the happiness that overflowed between us. But as I looked at the photo, my phone vibrated. It was a message. I was puzzled, as I didn't recognize the number. The content of the message intrigued me. "Be careful with Daniel. He's not who you think he is." My heart raced in my chest, and an uncomfortable feeling began to settle in me. I looked at Daniel, who was still goofing around, and the image of that message contrasted sharply with the joy I felt by his side. "Is everything okay?" Daniel asked, noticing my expression. I hesitated, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "Yeah, just a strange message," I replied, trying to disguise my unease. "Nothing I can't ignore." He nodded, but the worry in his eyes made me restless. Why was I giving so much importance to a message from an unknown number? I trusted Daniel, and he had never given me a reason to doubt. It was just a bad joke, I thought, trying to calm myself. The rest of the picnic continued lightly, but the message wouldn't leave my mind. What did it mean? I didn't want something so small to ruin our happiness. Daniel pulled me to dance, and as he spun me around amidst laughter, I decided to set the message aside. That moment was ours, and I didn't want to lose it because of a stranger. In the following days, life returned to normal. Work, the messages exchanged with Daniel, plans for the weekend. Everything seemed perfect again. However, the message continued to echo in my mind, like a shadow that refused to disappear. I tried not to pay attention, but suspicion began to settle subtly. Then, one night, I returned from a friend's house and decided to stop by Daniel's place. He was alone, and the familiarity of his home enveloped me immediately. The living room was softly lit, and the scent of his cologne still lingered in the air. I sat on the sofa, and he came over, wrapping me in a tight hug. "Hey, love," he said, with a smile that melted away any lingering doubt I might have had. "Hey, Daniel," I replied, trying to force a smile back, but my unease hadn't disappeared. As we chatted about trivial things, something told me I needed answers. But how could I ask? How could I ruin that perfect moment? Finally, we decided to watch a movie, and as we sat together, I couldn't shake off the thought of the message. When the movie started, my hand, almost unconsciously, began to explore the coffee table for something to distract me. And that's when I found a forgotten phone, with the screen lit up. I looked around, but Daniel was distracted by the TV screen. An almost uncontrollable impulse made me grab the phone. What was I doing? This was an invasion of privacy, but curiosity overwhelmed me. The screen displayed a recent conversation. I hesitated, but the temptation was too great. As I began to read the messages, my heart sank. The words were intimate, affectionate, and the other woman referred to Daniel in a way I had never imagined. They spoke to each other with a tone of complicity that cut my heart. The phrase, "I can't wait to see you again," echoed in my mind like a sinister echo. The world around me crumbled. Desperate, I looked back at Daniel, who was still absorbed in the movie. How could I confront him? How could I ask about those messages without sounding like a crazy person? But the truth was I couldn't ignore it. The betrayal was right there before my eyes, and I felt lost. The movie continued, but I couldn't focus on anything. What should I do? Confront Daniel now? Wait until the night was over? The tension inside me grew with each second. The love I felt mixed with the betrayal I had just discovered, creating a whirlwind of emotions that threatened to consume me. "Clara, are you okay?" Daniel's voice brought me back to reality. He looked at me with concern, and at that moment, I realized there was no turning back. The truth needed to come to light, and the only thing I knew for sure was that from that moment on, nothing would be the same. My heart was racing, feeling as if the world was crumbling around me. That cell phone in my hands, with the messages I should have never read, felt like an unbearable weight. Daniel was there, in the living room, with an expression that mixed worry and nervousness. He didn't know what I had discovered, but I knew that this moment of confrontation was inevitable. I took a deep breath, trying to gather enough courage to speak. "Daniel," I started, my voice trembling. "We need to talk." He looked at me, confused. "About what, Clara? Everything is fine between us, right?" "No, it's not," I replied, with anger and sadness boiling inside me. "I found your phone. I saw the messages." He was silent for a moment, the words seeming to vanish from his mind. His expression turned grim, and I knew he was thinking of how to justify himself. "Clara, it's not what you think. I can explain." "Explain what?" I retorted, frustration overflowing. "That you were talking to another woman? That you were lying to me? Is that friendship, Daniel?" He got up, eyes wide, and began pacing back and forth. "It was just a friend, Clara. It's not what you imagine. Sarah, we were just reminiscing about childhood things. It doesn't mean anything." "Then tell me, Daniel," I said, crossing my arms. "Why didn't you tell me you were talking to her? Why did you hide this from me?" "I didn't want to worry you. I didn't think it would lead to this. I swear I'm not cheating on you. What I feel for you is real." He seemed desperate, but I couldn't let myself be swayed by his words. At that moment, the trust one had in him was being torn apart. "Real?" I laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "Is what you feel for me real? Or are the lies you've built real? I don't know who to trust anymore." He stepped closer, his expression now softer, almost pleading. Clara, please. I'm an idiot. Let me explain. I don't want to lose you. I need some time, I said, my voice choked. I need to think. I can't stay here pretending nothing happened. He tried to hold me, but I stepped away. No, don't do this. You can't just leave me like this. I promise I'll change. I'll work to fix everything. I don't know if that's enough, Daniel. I don't know if I can trust you again, I replied, feeling the tears streaming down my face. The pain was unbearable, and I just wanted everything to be different. Clara, he said, his voice almost breaking. Please don't leave me. I took a step back, feeling the space between us become an abyss. I'm not leaving you. I'm just trying to protect myself. And with that, I walked out of the living room, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The next day, the pain was still palpable. All I wanted was for everything to go back to normal, but reality was very different. I went to the cafe where we used to go, hoping to distract my mind. While having a coffee, I received a message from one of my friends, Louisa. Want to go out later? I need a break from work, and you need to distract yourself too, she wrote. I quickly replied, agreeing with the idea. I knew I needed to vent, to share my pain. When the time came, I met Louisa and two more friends, Anna and Jessica, at a cozy bar. The soft music created a warm atmosphere, but my mind was elsewhere. Hi, Clara. How are you? Louisa asked, with a worried expression on her face. Actually, I'm not okay, I said bluntly. Daniel cheated on me. The reactions were immediate. Jessica covered her mouth with her hand, while Anna furrowed her brow. What? How did you find out? I took a deep breath and told them everything. The messages, the conversation we had. Each word made me feel the pain again, but it also gave me strength to share my story. He said it was just a friendship, but I can't believe him anymore, I finished, looking into the eyes of each of them. Louisa took my hand, squeezing it encouragingly. Clara, you deserve someone who respects you. This is not a way to love. I know, but I still love Daniel. This is so confusing, I replied, my voice choked. Look, love is not just about feelings. It's also about respect and trust. If he broke that, you need to think about what's best for you, Anna said. You can't stay tied to someone who doesn't value you, Clara. You're amazing and deserve the best, Jessica added sincerely. Their words resonated within me. I knew they were right, but the love I felt for Daniel still held me to him. The idea of leaving him and moving on seemed daunting, even though I knew it was the right thing to do. I just need time, I think. Time to feel, to understand what I really want, I said, my voice firmer now. And in the meantime, we're here for you, Louisa affirmed, and her words brought a bit of comfort to my heart. We continued talking, laughing, and reminiscing about the good times we had together. Time passed, and each laugh seemed to pull me a little further away from the pain that consumed me. But still, the shadow of Daniel lingered over me. That night, as I tried to sleep, my mind wouldn't stop racing. I remembered Daniel and how he used to make me feel loved and safe. The memories were sweet, but now they were stained by betrayal. I wondered if there was still a way back for us, and if he could truly change. But the image of the cell phone, the messages, wouldn't leave my mind. I couldn't ignore it. I needed to be strong, to think of myself. With that, I finally managed to close my eyes and, with some effort, tried to leave thoughts of him behind, even if just for a moment. The next day, sunlight streamed through the window, bringing a new hope. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I was determined to find myself again. Life wouldn't stop because of Daniel. I had to move forward, even if that meant saying goodbye to a love that had once been so beautiful. That morning, the The first step I took was to enroll in an art class. I had always loved painting, and now, more than ever, I needed this form of expression to heal my wounds. The idea of losing myself in colors and shapes seemed like the best way to give new meaning to my life. As I filled out the form, a feeling of freedom began to grow inside me. It was as if every letter I wrote was freeing me from a weight I had carried for so long. I looked up at the blue sky and smiled, feeling that perhaps all of this was the beginning of a new journey. A journey in search of love, but above all, self-love. The hours dragged on in a whirlwind of confused thoughts and heightened emotions. I was at home, surrounded by a deafening silence that made me restless. The afternoon light filtered through the curtains, but it couldn't penetrate the darkness that had settled in my heart. What to do now? Daniel had betrayed me, and everything I thought was real between us turned out to be a big illusion. I decided I needed to understand his story better, not because I still loved him, but because there was a void that needed to be filled. The idea that he had a dark past, an abusive relationship, intrigued me. How could someone who had suffered so much make another person suffer? What had led him to that choice? With these questions hammering in my head, I began to seek answers. The first thing I did was rummage through his house. Not out of disrespect, but because I needed to know. I opened drawers and turned over his things, as if I could find a piece of the truth there. It was in a folder of old documents that I found a yellowed letter addressed to him, written by a woman named Juliana. The tone of the letter was one of despair, and the words overflowed with pain. She spoke of a toxic relationship, of manipulations and fears that trapped her. I stared at the paper, feeling a tightness in my chest. Those words reflected a vicious cycle of pain and love, and I didn't know if I was more frightened by that or by the possibility that Daniel was trapped in that same cycle. The next day, as I sat down at the table for coffee, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a friend, Louisa, asking how I was. I hesitated a bit before replying, but eventually typed that I was just reflecting. She soon suggested we meet for coffee, and without thinking much, I agreed. At that moment, I knew I needed support, someone who could help me get my head straight. "Clara, you don't look well," Louisa said as soon as she saw me. We were sitting at a cafe table, the aroma of the drink mingling with the sweet smell of the cakes displayed at the counter. "What's going on?" "It's Daniel," I replied, trying to hold back tears. "I found out he cheated on me, and now I'm trying to understand why." Louisa frowned, concerned. "That's very painful, Clara. Have you thought about breaking up with him? Why are you still wondering what happened?" I took a deep breath, feeling a wave of heightened emotions. "It's complicated. I love him, Louisa. And now I'm discovering that he had a difficult past, an abusive relationship. I don't know if I can just leave him. Part of me feels that he needs help." Louisa shook her head, incredulous. "Clara, you're not a therapist. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. The issue is, he cheated on you. That's unacceptable." Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I knew Louisa was right. But what if Daniel was different? What if there was an explanation? It was as if I were in an emotional labyrinth, and every exit I found led me back to the beginning. After what felt like an eternity over coffee, I returned home with a more confused mind than ever. I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel and the conflicting feelings he stirred in me. When night fell, a message popped up on my phone. It was him. "Hi, Clara. Can we talk? I'm sorry for what happened." My heart raced. It was as if a part of me wanted to ignore him, but the other part was desperate for answers. I needed to understand. So, without thinking too much, I replied, "Okay, we can meet tomorrow." Anxiety took over me as I awaited the next day. What would I say? What would he say? When we finally met at a cafe, the tension was palpable. He had a bouquet of flowers in his hands, and I didn't know whether I should feel flattered or irritated. "Hi," he said, with a nervous smile. "These are for you." "Thank you," I replied, unable to hide the coldness in my voice. "We need to talk." We sat at a secluded table, and I looked at him, trying to read his expressions. "You cheated on me, Daniel. How could you do this?" He took a deep breath, looking more nervous than I had ever seen him. "Clara, I know I messed up. It was a moment of weakness. But I swear it didn't mean anything." I was confused. Confused. I couldn't believe it. "You were in a relationship, Daniel. How can you justify cheating with confusion?" I understand that it seems horrible, but he hesitated, searching for the right words. "I suffered a lot in childhood. My previous relationship was very toxic, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was an idiot and let myself get carried away." My eyes filled with tears, and I felt his pain, but I couldn't let that erase my own pain. "That's not a justification. You can't just hurt another person because of your traumas." He lowered his head, and for a moment, silence settled between us. "I really want to change, Clara. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I don't want to lose you." A part of me wanted to believe him, but another part screamed that it was an emotional trap. "You say that now, but what if you feel lost again? What if someone else comes along and you let yourself get carried away again?" He looked me in the eyes, and I thought I saw a glimpse of vulnerability. "I'm a work in progress, Clara, but I want you to be part of that. Please give me a chance." Those words echoed in my mind. I wanted to believe that people could change, that love was enough to heal the deepest wounds. But at the same time, an inner voice warned me about the danger of getting carried away by empty promises. "I don't know, Daniel. I need time to think." He nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "That's okay. I'll be here, waiting. I promise I'll make an effort." As I left the cafe, a part of me wanted to run into his arms and forget everything. But another part knew I needed to be strong, not just for myself, but for him as well. Life wasn't just about love. It was about respect, trust, and the ability to face one's own demons. On my way home, the image of Daniel and his promises stayed etched in my mind. What would I do next? The only certainty I had was that, regardless of my decision, I couldn't lose myself in the emotional labyrinth he represented. The night was cool and calm. The city lights sparkled like stars in the dark sky as I walked along the sidewalk toward the bar where I had arranged to meet Lucas. The idea of being with him excited me, but at the same time, a knot in my stomach reminded me of Daniel. He was far away, but his presence still lingered over me, like a shadow that doesn't easily dissipate. As I entered the bar, I spotted Lucas sitting at a table in the corner, smiling at me. He was a recent friend, but since we started talking, I felt a connection I hadn't experienced in a long time. He got up and came toward me, his gaze warm. "Hi, Clara. You look amazing," he said, with a genuine tone that made me feel special. "Thanks, Lucas. You look great too," I replied, feeling a bit more at ease. We sat down and began chatting about trivial things, but soon the conversation flowed into deeper topics. Lucas was attentive and always seemed willing to listen. I talked about my recent discovery about Daniel and how I was struggling to understand everything that had happened. He listened intently, without interrupting, which made me feel truly valued. "You deserve someone who respects you and makes you happy, Clara. No one should go through what you went through," Lucas commented, with a serious look. "I know. The hardest part is letting go. I still love him, but I don't know if I can trust him again," I confessed, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Sometimes, love is not enough. You need to think about what's best for you," he replied softly. As we talked, I couldn't help but notice how genuinely Lucas cared about my well-being. It made me realize how much I had forgotten about myself in the past few months. Daniel's presence had consumed so much of my time and energy that I could hardly see who I truly was anymore. When the bar started to get busier, I decided it was time to go. Lucas walked me to the door, and before we said goodbye, he gave me a warm hug. I felt the positive energy he radiated, something that reminded me there was still hope for happiness in my life. "Can we meet again?" "I'd love to see you more," Lucas said, a smile on his face. "Of course. I'd love that too," I replied, feeling an excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. In that moment, a sense of freedom washed over me. I hadn't realized how much I needed a friend like Lucas, someone who made me feel valued again. The way back home felt lighter, and as I walked, my mind began to wander about how I could focus on myself and my passions. In the following days, Lucas's presence continued to bring me a new energy. He invited me to an art event happening that weekend, and I eagerly accepted. Art had always been an important part of my life, but I had lost myself amid the emotional turmoil of my relationship with Daniel. On Friday night, as I prepared for the event, I couldn't help but feel nervous. The dress I chose was simple but made me feel confident. Looking in the mirror, I tried to remember the woman I was before Daniel. A strong, loving Clara full of dreams. When I arrived at the event, the atmosphere was vibrant. The lights reflected off the displayed artworks, and soft music filled the air. Lucas was already there, and his smile when he saw me lit up my heart. He approached me, and as he greeted me, I realized I was surrounded by interesting people who shared the same passion I did. "What an amazing place, right?" Lucas commented, looking around. "Yes, it's wonderful. I feel like I'm starting to find myself again here," I replied with a sincere smile. We mingled among the artworks, and each painting and sculpture we admired seemed to tell a story. Art had the power to transport me to another dimension, far from the emotional chaos I had been living in. As we talked about the different pieces, I realized I was genuinely having fun. The laughter and exchange of ideas with Lucas made me forget my problems. However, in the back of my mind, Daniel's image was still present. He hadn't reached out to me since our last tense conversation, but I knew I couldn't ignore the possibility that he was still watching my every move. When the night came to an end and we were about to leave, I couldn't help but look around, as if I expected to see him somehow. And then I saw him. Daniel was there, in a corner of the room, watching everything with an expression of jealousy and anger. My heart raced. The last place I expected to find him was there, at an event that should have been a celebration of art and new connections. His gaze fixed on me and Lucas, and I could feel the tension in the air. "Clara, what are you doing here with him?" Daniel approached, his voice laced with possessiveness. "I'm having fun, Daniel." "That's none of your business," I replied, trying to remain calm. "It is my business when you're with another guy." "You shouldn't be with him," he insisted, his eyes shining with contained rage. Lucas, sensing the tension, stepped forward. "Sorry, but Clara is free to do what she wants." "You have no right to control her," he said firmly. Lucas's words echoed in me like a hymn of freedom. Daniel's possessiveness was not love, it was control. A wave of clarity hit me, and I realized I could no longer allow him to dictate my life. "Daniel, I am not your property. You need to understand that," I said, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. He hesitated, the look of anger mixing with confusion. "Clara, I just want you to know that I care. I just can't be without you," he murmured, his vulnerability palpable. "But you lost me when you chose to betray me." "I can't go back," I replied, feeling a deep sadness, but with renewed determination. Lucas stood by my side, offering his silent support. "Come on, Clara. We don't need to stay here," he suggested, and I nodded, feeling it was time to walk away. As we left the event, adrenaline was still coursing through my veins. I looked at Lucas and smiled, feeling a mix of gratitude and relief. "Thank you for being by my side," I said, emotion overflowing. "I'm always here to support you." "You don't have to go through this alone," he replied with a sincere look. That night wasn't just an escape from Daniel, it was a step toward rediscovering who I was. I wanted to focus on myself, my passions, and what truly made me happy. And above all, I wanted to learn to trust again, not just others, but myself. The soft light of late afternoon filtered through the studio windows, casting dancing shadows on the white walls. I was sitting in front of my screen, brushes and paint scattered around me, trying to concentrate on the work I was creating. Each brushstroke was an exercise in liberation, a way to channel the pain and frustration that consumed me. The smell of acrylic paint mingled with the aroma of the coffee I had just brewed, and for a brief moment, a sense of tranquility enveloped me. But there was still a weight in my heart, an echo of the lies Daniel had told. I was immersed in my thoughts when the studio door opened. It was Daniel, his face tense and worried. He always had this way of entering a room, as if he brought a storm with him. I didn't know how to feel seeing him there, interrupting my moment of peace. "Clara, can we talk?" His voice was a mix of hesitation and urgency. I bit my lip, trying to hold back the avalanche of emotions that was surfacing. "About what, Daniel?" I asked, trying to sound neutral, but my tone betrayed my vulnerability. "About us, about what happened." He took a step forward, but I didn't move. I remained seated, observing him as if he were a stranger. "You had all the time in the world to talk about this, didn't you? Ever since I found out the truth." The venom in my words was there, and I didn't care to hide it. "I know I was wrong, Clara. I really sought help. I'm trying to understand what led me to do this." His expression was one of genuine despair, but a part of me wondered if it was really sincere or just an attempt to regain control. "Understand? Or do you just want me to forgive you?" The anger was growing inside me. "You betrayed me, Daniel. This isn't something you understand overnight." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if processing my words. "I know, and I deeply regret it. I never meant to hurt you. Sarah, she was a mistake. She meant nothing to me." It was more than a mistake. It was a deliberate choice, Daniel. I was firm, trying to maintain my composure. "And now I don't know if I can see you the same way." He moved closer, almost pleading. "Please, Clara. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to regain your trust. I'm in therapy, talking about my insecurities, my fears. I want to change. And what if I don't want you to change for me?" My response came out sharper than I intended, but the truth was I was tired. Tired of trying to understand his motivations, tired of fighting for a love that was fading. I just want a chance. An opportunity to show that I can be better. He seemed sincere, but I knew that words were just words. What mattered were actions, and so far, his actions had been devastating. "I need time, Daniel. Time to think about what I want. I can't just go back to being the Clara you knew before." I spoke, trying to be honest, even knowing that this could hurt even more. He nodded slowly, as if accepting the harshness of reality. "I will wait. I will do whatever it takes. Just don't let me go yet." The intensity of his gaze made me hesitate. Part of me wanted to believe he could change, but another part knew I needed to prioritize my own well-being. "I don't know if that's enough, Daniel." He took a deep breath, as if trying to muster courage. "I'll step back then. I know you need space. But please, don't cut all ties. I still care about you." And with that, he left the studio, leaving a trail of uncertainty in the air. I stayed there alone, staring at the blank canvas in front of me. The mix of feelings was overwhelming. The love I still felt for him was at war with the pain his actions had caused. How could I move on? The next day, the art event I had planned was approaching, and the anticipation filled the air. Friends and family would be coming, and I was eager to showcase my work. Art had become my refuge, a way to express what was inside me. But Daniel's presence still loomed like a shadow, and I wondered if he would show up. I arrived at the venue, a spacious and bright place, decorated with my works. I felt a mix of nervousness and excitement as I arranged the details. My friends were helping me, giving final touches and praising each piece. But amid the laughter and conversations, my thoughts still floated towards Daniel. When the event finally began, the room filled with people. I smiled and chatted, but a part of me was distant, waiting for a sign from him. And then, in the distance, I saw him. Daniel was there, standing at the entrance, holding a bouquet of flowers. My heart raced, but it wasn't with joy. It was a mix of anxiety and resistance. "Clara," he called out to me, and his voice cut through the noise of the crowd. The room seemed to silence for a moment as all eyes turned towards us. I tried to maintain my composure. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" I asked, trying to sound firm, but the weakness in my voice betrayed my effort. "I wanted to support you. I hope you don't mind that I came." He stepped closer, extending the flowers. "They're for you. A small celebration of your talent." I looked at the bouquet, a mix of roses and lilies, and felt a lump form in my throat. "Daniel, this isn't what I need right now." My response was direct, but the sadness in his eyes hit me. "Clara, I just want to show that I'm here for you, that I care." He looked so vulnerable, but I couldn't let that distract me from everything that had happened. You can't just show up and expect everything to go back to the way it was. It doesn't work like that. I tried to stay firm, but the sadness threatened to overflow. He looked around, realizing that people were watching us. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause a scene. I just wanted to see you. I need to focus on the event, Daniel. I can't deal with this right now." I took a deep breath, trying to push him from my mind. "Then I'll step back. But please, remember that I'm here if you need me." He turned slowly, and I knew he was withdrawing not just from the space, but also from my life. A mix of relief and pain enveloped me as I watched him walk away. The event continued, but his presence was still on my mind. The conversations revolved around art, compliments, and laughter, but I couldn't disconnect from the emotional turmoil. When the night finally came to an end, as the lights dimmed and people began to disperse, I received a message that would change everything. It was from Sarah, the woman with whom Daniel had cheated on me. My heart raced at the sight of her name. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the message. "Hi, Clara, I know this may seem unexpected, but I need to be honest with you. Daniel reached out to me, and what he said wasn't true. He was just after money, not love. I don't want you to go through the pain I went through." That hit me like a punch in the stomach. The words mixed with the confusion I already felt. The betrayal was even deeper than I imagined. Tears started to slip down my face, and I realized there was no turning back. I was ready to free myself, to leave the past behind and seek a new life, far from lies and pain. The decision was made, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. The air was heavy in the room when I decided it was time to confront Daniel and Sarah. The meeting I scheduled wasn't just a get-together. It was a battle for my truth. The chosen place was a discreet cafe, far from our happy memories, where the smell of roasted coffee mixed with the nervousness coursing through my veins. I arrived first, feeling my heart race with each passing second. The anticipation of seeing them together again filled me with a mix of anger and determination. When Daniel walked in, his expression was one of relief upon seeing me. Sarah followed him with a disinterested, almost disdainful look. The contrast between the two was striking. Daniel, with his charming demeanor that once captivated me, and Sarah, with an air of contempt that made me uneasy. I sat at the table, maintaining my composure but feeling the weight of the tension. "Clara," Daniel said, trying to smile. "I'm so glad you..." "Don't come at me with that, Daniel," I interrupted, my voice firm. "We need to talk. We need to clear up the lies." He fell silent, his expression shifting from relief to discomfort. Sarah crossed her arms, watching me with a look that seemed to say I wasn't worthy of their attention. I felt a wave of courage wash over me. "I know about the messages, about you and Sarah, and I know that you were just using me." The phrase hung in the air like a weight that had dropped. Daniel's gaze turned defensive. "Clara, it's not what you think. I was just trying to understand." "Understand? What exactly were you trying to understand, Daniel?" "What I didn't understand was how you could do this to me. How you could lie so shamelessly." My voice rose, and a few glances turned our way. But I didn't care. What was at stake was much bigger than the opinions of strangers. Sarah, who until then seemed oblivious, decided to intervene. "Look, I'm not here to be your enemy, Clara. Daniel and I have a history. He was just trying to deal with the pain of the past." "So you admit that he was using that to hurt me? To take revenge for something that has nothing to do with me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Anger boiled inside me, but there was something more. A sense of liberation was beginning to form. I was no longer the victim. "That's not how things work," Daniel said, now more nervous. "I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. And not just me. You hurt yourself too," I replied, feeling that the conversation was at a point of no return. "You put yourself in a position to lose everything, Daniel. For what, exactly? To feed your wounded ego." "Clara, I'm trying to change. I sought help. I want to be a better person," he said, his voice almost pleading. But what I saw was a lost man who didn't know how to deal with his own weaknesses. Sarah looked at him, a mix of compassion and disdain, and I realized she was as tired as I was. "Daniel, you don't need to use people to feel better. That's not love. That never was love." Those words seemed to echo in my mind. What I had with Daniel wasn't love. It was an illusion. A dream I had created from empty promises and sweet words. I had to free myself. And in that moment, the idea of a new beginning felt more appealing than anything I had ever wished for. "I want you to know, Daniel, that I am no longer yours. I will no longer be your whim, your escape," I declared, my voice steady. "You don't deserve me, and I don't deserve to live in the shadow of your insecurities." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the gazes of others in the cafe, but I didn't care. What really mattered was the sense of power growing inside me. I was in control of my life and my emotions. I didn't need Daniel or Sarah to validate who I was. "Clara, please, I can change," he pleaded, but now his tone sounded empty. There was no longer any truth in his words. The trust one once had dissolved like smoke. "No, Daniel, you can't change what has already happened. And I can't ignore the lies you told me," I replied, my voice calmer but firm. "What you did was unacceptable, and I can't live with that anymore." Sarah, for her part, seemed to be enjoying the situation. "Do you really think he cares, Clara? He just wants you to forgive him so he can go back to his old games."
12 words hit Daniel like a blow. Hello Kedet Sarah, and I saw the light of truth shining in his eyes. It was as if he were finally waking up from a long nightmare. "Sarah, stop. You can't talk like that," he said, almost lost. "I'm not here to protect you, Daniel. You need to face the consequences of your actions," Sarah replied, with a tone of disdain. That conversation was becoming a spectacle, and I no longer wanted to be part of it, so stood up, resolute. "You will no longer submit to this. Daniel, you had your chance and threw it away. Now it's my turn to live. To find true and out love. A love that is based on lies and betrayals. With that, I left the cafe, feeling the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. The air outside felt fresher, cleaner. I was free. And as I walked, I realized there was a new pact needed to make with myself. To seek a love that was genuine, that respected me, and that made me happy. The tears that were once of sadness were now of relief and hope. I was ready for a new beginning, ready for a new art exhibition that would represent my rebirth. The vibrant colors I would use would reflect the strength I had finally found. And as I looked to the future, I saw a path illuminated by true friendships and new opportunities for love. What was once a end was now becoming a beautiful beginning. And, with a smile on my face, I moved forward, determined to create my own story.